We are about to enter one of the most significant weeks in the history of finance, not just cryptocurrency. Additionally, things might change this week. What am I talking about exactly? I do believe that this week may represent the beginning of the market's significant awakening and the eventual beginning of some higher highs. The idea that this market is ready for alt season is one of the main topics I've been discussing over the past few weeks. I do think that we will witness everyone believes it's impossible that it won't happen during one of the biggest alt seasons in cryptocurrency history. This is precisely why I believe that this market is correct. Alts are being hit, and sentiment is at an all-time low. At the same time, we're witnessing some of the most significant movements on the adoption side, and although the news surrounding the old coin market itself are extremely bullish, everyone is still rather pessimistic. They're down a lot from their previous highs. Do I now believe that this is the main cause of the alt season and that things will start to change? It mostly concerns the circumstances around TradFi, the state of the US economy, and even the state of the world economy. Liquidity is beginning to flow as the M2 supply breaks out. Furthermore, everyone continues to draw attention to the negative news. The tariff talks, the trade war, and the back and forth between the US and China. Again, none of the bullish elements underlying this are being seen by anyone. However, given the current state of the market, it makes sense because, as you may know, stocks were also severely impacted over the past few months. Additionally, we see a lovely sea of red when we look at cryptocurrency on a daily and monthly basis. Although there is undoubtedly some green there, many older coins, including XRP, have had a difficult time lately. You see, XRP has been struggling to move lately, and this is making many people angry and a little impatient since, even on the 7-day, this is how the 7-day looks. The 1 month looks like this. We've been selling off or cutting sideways since January, so the first month doesn't appear too bad. But when you zoom out and go all the way back to, say, January, we're approaching the end of nearly 4 months of only sideways and choppiness in the price movement, which, irritates a lot of people. Many people become irritated by it, and their impatience reaches all-time highs. So once more, I get it. I understand. However, I would like you all to zoom out and see how far we've come on several historical coin charts as well as XRP as an example. They look great, However, I still comprehend it as I mentioned. I understand. Waiting is something we detest. However, given the current state of the market, where Bitcoin is trading around $94,000, the weekly closing was not particularly impressive. However, supremacy is what I'm actually focusing on the most, isn't it? On the old coin season index, we have been observing a slight waning of Bitcoin supremacy. The slider is beginning to shift in the direction of the old coin season side. It is great to see, but I don't think we're there yet, and I believe that many people actually make a little too many assumptions about prior season calls. Many individuals, myself included, have been attempting to forecast the precise time of the old season. Based on the dominance of Bitcoin, correct? It's crazy that this thing is still at 64 or nearly 65%. Since you don't always need to look at 1 week, 1 day, 3 days, or anything similar, I've been keeping an eye on the quarterly and 3-month charts for Bitcoin domination. The macro view is sometimes all that is truly necessary to examine. Even with the 3-week chart, I've noticed this, correct? When we look at the 3-week chart of some of these old coin charts, for example, it tells us that we should still be technically quite optimistic on old coins. However, we may observe something quite intriguing when we look at the dominance chart on the quarterly, right, and 3-month periods. And the pattern is 1,096 days. If all goes according to plan, the old season should begin in June or July. All right, how true is this then? To be honest, we have no idea. We can only rely on one cycle. It's not as if this 1,096-day pattern keeps repeating in 3 or 4 cycles. I'm keeping an eye on this to see if it happens again. And I do believe that we may begin to observe full season form in June or July. And the reason I think so is because of what we have planned for this week, which I will discuss in a moment. However, the primary aspect of Bitcoin was that we were able to obtain the weekly close. It wasn't very optimistic. We did close at approximately 94.3K. Personally, I would have cherished a closure that was at least 95K. The weekly candle close for Bitcoin would have been the most bullish if it had been above $98,000, mostly closing above the highs from around the end of November, or simply clearing some of these earlier highs from February. But, as you can see, the most of the resistance will be located in this red zone on the chart as we attempt to flip some significant support and resistance zones. Right now, we're examining Bitcoin in great detail and attempting to predict what will happen next. You know, it's a little difficult to see on the weekly. However, I do believe that this zone down here is tapped when we go to the daily or the 3-day. This amounts to approximately 88.4K to $92,000. However, if we're truly considering it, it might actually happen this week depending on what is released. Before we truly start to chop a little, I do believe that we might see a push back down to these lows. So we would do something like this, where we would chop and kind of push back up into this red zone. And based on what we see next, this would cut through June. Let's discuss that now, since you're probably sick of my saying, "Oh, well, what's actually happening?" By now, let's actually address that. What's going on, correct? This week, some very significant events are taking place. The S&P Global Services PMI data, which is released on Monday, is the first. Thus, ISM non-manufacturing PMI data is also available today. The big event, the Fed's interest rate decision and press conference, comes on Wednesday. That's what I'm primarily examining here. Everything else. Yes, of course. Though not as much as the Fed, it does have an effect on the market. Correct? This week, Fed Chair Powell is the center of attention. We released our transactions for premium customers following recent demand from Trump to lower rates. Naturally, they just sort of display their high-end side. Since the Fed has been under a lot of pressure to make cuts, the primary focus of my analysis is what the Fed will do next. Do we receive a cut in May or June, I wonder? And by, Bitcoin, I mean just this. We will most likely sell off if there isn't a rate decrease this week, which will enable us to purchase some old coins at a deep discount. Additionally, it allows us to somewhat understand this dull price behavior, which I completely approve of. That would force us to spike higher before the rate cut in June. Why, then, am I so preoccupied with this week's rate decrease decision? If we believe there won't be a rate cut, they will simply carry on with their current course of action. The primary reason I'm so focused is that every headline piece I've been reading says that the Fed's actions this week will disappoint everyone since they won't essentially lower rates. Every headline item tells us what we should expect, which is precisely why everyone kind of blows the rate cut out of proportion. Suddenly, however, we get the opposite. Is there a chance that this week will be different and that we simply follow instructions? Yes, that is how it may happen. Since it has the potential to have a significant impact on the market, I continue to believe that this is arguably one of the most important issues on which we should concentrate. Furthermore, I will explain the precise reason why it might. Powell of the Fed, however, seems poised to defy Trump and keep interest rates unchanged. The Fed will resist requests for rate reduction.